Operational excellence, how to align vision, culture, and execution for scalable success. Welcome back to The Pursuit of Excellence. I'm your host, Tinja. Today, we're diving into something that sits at the core of every high-performing business: alignment. If your business feels chaotic, your team seems confused, or you're scaling but not sustainably, chances are you've skipped a few foundational steps. So, in this episode, I'm sharing my personal strategy to establish a clear business trajectory, build loyalty through trust, and create a culture that performs without burnout or bullshit. Let's break down what I call the strategic dashboard for excellence, a living, breathing playbook that aligns vision with execution and people with purpose. Let's get into it. Establishing strategic baseline. I get asked over and over in interviews, what's the one thing you can recommend that an entrepreneur or a high-achieving professional do to start to set themselves up for success? And frankly, that's just such a loaded question because it's not just one thing. We're talking about the pursuit of excellence. It's about building what that pursuit is. The answer is compounding fundamentals that require you to define your vision, mission, core values, ideal client, KPIs. You have to build a strategic plan and an execution strategy that justify. You can't just wing it. When I got into finance, it literally killed a piece of my soul because they were preaching this thing called Project 200. It's just bullshit. Just identify 200 people and say this bullshit script and you'll be good. It honestly took everything in my being to go along with their process because going from being an expert in one arena to being a newbie in another requires humility. But if we're being blunt, the model is just dumb and you're setting people up for failure. So many leaders are setting up their teams for failure because they refuse to build a strategic plan, right? So, where do you start when building a strategic dashboard? And please keep in mind, this is a one-pager that you make visible, you refer to early and often, you incorporate into your meeting openers, right? You review and adjust to ensure alignment. Okay, so on this one-pager, you have your vision. This is your overall why, your purpose. Who do you want to be? What kind of impact do you want to have? Who do you serve? This has to be clear and distilled. So, for example, in the energy sector, we have things like be number one in drilling systems globally, be the training ground that energizes subsea professionals to be tomorrow's leaders, to be the most trusted O&M provider to wind farm owners in finance, to be the go-to resource for strategic business planning for privately held organizations. That's the vision. Now we have the mission. This is the how. How are you going to achieve and or deliver on that objective? So we're going to line item it. So think, foster a culture of excellence while conducting ourselves in an ethical and safe manner. We've got things like consistently exceed our customers' expectation in quality, performance, service, and value. Drive leading technology and product innovation while setting industry standards. Again, for me, to provide optimized solutions for business owners to ensure success at every stage of business for the family, the team, and the business. And then lastly, as a transition, to live and lead our core values of integrity, collaboration, innovation, and excellence. You have to define your core values and not just put pretty words on a graphic. Like, you have to define them. So, for example, these are the core values that I used when I was the co-founder of the special care planning team, where we were building life care plans for families that had kiddos with a disability or a special need. And so it was super important that we had alignment. So words like commitment to the plan, to the families, and to the individual with special needs. Then we had compassion. So compassion to understanding every family's unique situation. Then we had coordination of the family, the professionals, and the plans, because we were building 3 plans in one. We were building the kiddos plan, like the life care plan, the mom and dad's plan, and the estate plan. And then lastly, community leaders. So for us, it was super important that we had continued service to bettering our communities. So that's the framework. But then you build out your critical strategies and key initiatives. This is where you silo out your business model. When we're talking about critical strategies, we're talking about categories like So for me in my financial world, when I build out my dashboard, I'm looking at things like planning, products, execution, training. And then I start funneling those things down so that I can really flesh out where I'm going to allocate my time, my energy, and my resources so I can build out that strategic execution strategy. So think customer experience, meaning responsiveness, effective meeting management, like you are going to set up meeting management, rapport, purpose, value, expected outcomes. And are you managing time, etc.? We're thinking things like streamlined implementation, effective underwriting, timely communication, and of course, risk mitigation. Are we effectively and efficiently demonstrating strategic solutions for business transition, key employee retention, tax mitigation, strategic investment strategy that align with current liquidity needs, risk tolerance, return objectives, and for time horizon needs? Meaning, are we protecting cash flow and in tandem being cognizant of retirement planning? We also have things like revenue growth. What key things are going to drive revenue? So again, we're going to bullet point out exactly what's going to support that. So strategic alliances, centers of influence, penetration into focus markets. We call this going vertical. Maximizing client spend. I call this the whole enchilada, aka complete picture planning. Ultimately, I also have to focus on optimized solution recommendations. This one always kills me in the financial world because even though we are all licensed as fiduciaries, we are mandated to adhere to regulation best interests. An advisor still makes recommendations that technically align with the planning variables, but depending on what company they're with, depending on the commissions on the product, what licenses they hold, they might not be recommending the most optimal product. In the end, there are thousands of ways to skin a cat, and sometimes anything is better than nothing. I simply like to ensure that the client has enough information to understand the options available and understand the opportunity cost for what we're implementing. I also like to incorporate initiatives around team development. How are you growing, supporting, and developing your team? And lastly, on the one-pager strategic dashboard are KPIs. Okay, these are your key performance indicators. These are goals. These are smarted. You will always hear that winners keep score. You have to have goals that are smarted, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-stamped. Okay, so think if you're in finance, we've got things like FYC, GDC, AUM, number of plans, CREA, persistency, etc. If you're in energy or business, EBITDA, incident rate, revenue, backlog, on-time delivery, CAGR, employee engagement, right? So this has to be prescriptive. If you're in energy, think EBITDA, incident rate, revenue, backlog, on-time delivery, CAGR, employee engagement. So this, to be prescriptive, should be something that you eat, sleep, and breathe daily with your team. It should be a poster that you hang in the elevators, at your workstations, in the break room. You should have the team open meetings with an impact spiel, meaning how have they incorporated a core value into their daily life? You basically have it tattooed to the back of your eyelids. It has to become ingrained in you as the leader, but also in your team. And to make this even more applicable, each department, each team, each individual should create their own version of this dashboard. This is how you create buy-in across departments and levels of authority. People invest in things that they co-create. Autocratic leadership is ineffective unless it is full-blown crisis management. If the objective is to build loyal, engaged, collaborative, and innovative teams, those people have to be a part of the creation of the plan. They have to be given an opportunity to demonstrate that they are aligned and are incorporating everything I just laid out, right? You have to give them an opportunity to share feedback, perspectives, wins, failures, etc., right? And always tie it back to the strategic dashboard. And one last thing, this should be reviewed at least annually. I always like to tie this back to an Einstein story. So if you read his biography, what you'll learn is that he was a professor of mathematics at Princeton, notorious for giving the same test semester after semester with the exact same questions. And his response when students would challenge him about it, saying, I think you made a mistake because these are the exact same questions as last semester, right? He would respond, This semester, the answers are different. But if you think about it, the questions in our world are always the same, and how we respond has to be different. So, how do we increase revenue? How do we increase EBITDA? How do we increase market share? How do we increase customer experience? How do we reduce redundancy, right? How do we reduce turnover? The questions are always going to be the same, but how we answer changes. Marketplace drivers change. So ultimately, this leads us to all kinds of different concepts like understanding selling to the gap, commodity selling versus value selling, selling at the right level, and then doing the same evaluation for your customer. Think about it. What has to go right for your customer? So you build out that dashboard to understand what's the pain points, what are their drivers, what do they have to get right? Okay, so that was a lot. I'm going to put a pin in it for the strategic dashboard conversation. Now, let's talk about some of my other favorite fundamentals with regard to communication intelligence. All right, each one of these concepts could be their own hour and a half lecturette, but for the sake of this episode and fundamental takeaways, I'm going to distill the concepts. I always like to preface these concepts with one of the plant managers in Sella had this on his desk, and I always like to refer back to it. The art of communication is the difference between being right and being successful. So when we have a breakdown in communication, typically the root cause analysis will lead us to 3 dynamic concepts because of something called cognitive dissonance. Your brain is hardwired to see what you want to see, which means you are missing out on key information that will help shape your perspective. Literally, your brain cannot hold 2 conflicting ideas at the same time. This is one of the reasons why you cannot trust witness testimony. It's also one of the reasons why you have to dummy down. You have to dummy proof your intended message. Okay, so the 3 concepts I mentioned. Messaging fundamentals, meaning what goes into a message. Think sender receiver. How do you send a message and how do you receive a message? Communication styles. I'm not talking about personality types like DISC or personalysis, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, or anything else that involves a personality. I'm talking fundamentals of communication style archetypes, meaning looking only at the communication style elements alone. And lastly, handling objections. Okay, utilizing our proprietary Q&A model based on the Rogerian theory of decision tree analysis, tied in with some old school doctor's bedside manner to level set contentious environments and position to a win-win outcome at the back end. So whether you're negotiating contracts, trying to grow your business with sales, leading a team, managing conflict with clients, managing chaos with vendor mistakes, or even trying to get on the same page in your personal relationships or with kids, these concepts are crucial to understand. So let's start with the basics. Messaging. What comprises a message? Okay, 3 things. We've got words, tone, and nonverbals. That's it. Now, what percentage of importance of your understanding of my message comes from words? Like, how important are the words for you to understand my message? Most of the time, I will get answers with a very high percentage, or somebody's being cheeky, they're like 33, 33, 33, right? However, that's not actually the case. Yes, the words are important. Yes, you have to get them right. However, global research shows it's only about 7 to 12%, depending on what study you reference. So 12% of your understanding of my message. So how important is tone, the vocal variety, the inflection? Again, global research, 33%. That means nonverbals, what you do with your body and your face, that's 55% of your understanding of my message comes from this. What that tells you is that if there's a disconnect between the words, the tone, and the nonverbals, the words lose. Think about it. A super simple example. Okay, make your best grimace, your best frowny face, and say, I love you. I love you. Right? Do you believe me that I love you? Now do the reverse. Give me your best happy face. I hate you. Ultimately, there's a disconnect. So the words lose at the expense of the tone and the nonverbals. So the key to make sure that they align and that you underscore your message. People just won't believe you otherwise, right? You lose credibility, you lose trust. Then you get into concepts around postures, gestures, floor plans, and eye contact. But I'm going to leave that for another episode. So continuing to stay high level, we have communication styles, our quadrant model. So instead of looking at the complexity of an entire personality, we're looking at a limited array of communication style elements. Our perspective is that it is virtually impossible to change your personality unless you experience a catastrophic event. But what you can do is adjust your communication style to ensure that every interaction is successful. And we need to be able to adapt. The genesis of it derives from one of Sigmund Freud's followers. Yep, we're getting into Freudism. So Carl Jung. And what my mom liked, because this is her model, about his approach was that it differed on his perspective on therapy. He felt that limiting someone's psychological challenges to their mother, their father, and their sex life wasn't comprehensive enough. He's probably not wrong, but ultimately his assessment was that Freud's views were too limiting. So he created his own quadrant model. Some of you might know it as the feeler, thinker, sensor, and intuitor. Okay, so everybody's creating quadrant models. It's very popular. So what my mom did is take that foundation and look at it through a microscope to only assess the communication style elements, literally through a microscope. Think, this model has been around for over 45 years. Over 500,000 people have taken the inventory. So at a 30,000 foot overview of the inventory, I want to break it down for you. So you have 4 styles: driver, analytic, scientist, and expressive. Then you've got the elements that are adaptable. Okay, we've got speed of delivery, volume, vocal variety, language choice, organization of thought, postures, gestures, spatial requirements, and eye contact. So as a baseline assessment, we look at your dominant speaking style and your listening style. And again, always bringing it back to the fundamentals of sender-receiver. And because of the elements are all of the elements are adaptable, the objective is to adjust so that you can be effective with anybody and in any situation. So when we're thinking about it, right, in spatial requirements, how much space does somebody need? How are you shaking somebody's hand? Where do you go in an elevator? What are you putting in front of you to create a barrier? Where does eye contact go? Do you break up? Do you break down? Is it a laser focused eye test, right? You blink, I win. Ultimately, we need to figure out how to create alignment rather than a power play. I'm going to save the rest of the handling objections Q&A model for a different episode because it is so comprehensive and I want to make sure that we can dive deep into the details and strategy around how to utilize it effectively. Okay, and then we have handling objections. I think for the time, I'm going to save this for another episode. That way we can dial into the weeds on how to utilize and understand fundamentals. Excellence doesn't happen by accident. It's built deliberately, daily, and with discipline. If this episode gave you clarity on how to align your team, execute your strategy, and build a culture of loyalty and impact, do me a favor. Screenshot this episode and tag me with your biggest takeaway. Share it with a leader who's scaling and needs structure. And leave a review so we can keep spreading the pursuit of excellence. Until next time, build boldly, lead with purpose, and don't settle for average. Make sure to subscribe and follow the Pursuit of Excellence pod on Instagram for all of the latest podcast news and updates. And you can follow me at Tinja Anderson on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for all finance, fitness, and food. Until next time.